Speaker.
I call Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back. It's lovely to be back again in the House. It's unfortunate, however, to start the year with a senior member of the government being so confused as to think that when the Right Honourable Winston Peters wins the seat of Northland, should the board decide that that is what they will do, that somehow the overhang inside this Parliament doesn't just disappear. Mr. Smith seems to have been misinformed by his researchers, and I suggest he goes back and have a look at the Act, and that there is nothing to do with Invercargill. It is actually what the people of Northland would get should they see the light and make sure that they elected the Right Honourable Winston Peters should he stand. They get the whole team of New Zealand First actually up there in Northland, fixing Northland College, for example. Northland College, a school, sir, that this government tore down half of its buildings and didn't bother to go and rebuild them so that their students have to sit their exams inside the hallways. Or the other schools. One of the other things that the people of Northland will get, and let's talk about the area of education, is that failing schools like Whangaruru would be shut. And those students would be pulled out of Whangaruru, appropriately resourced in the current alternative school programs. The teen parent units would be increased and would be monitored more effectively. And all these other things are what would happen for Northland should Northland finally say to the National Party, we will not give you a free ride. How many members of Parliament have come out of the North that have been members of the National Party and name the things they have done for that area?
None.
There you go. So, and actually, I think what's more important is the only person who answered that question is my colleague behind me, because not a member of the National Party could say a single thing that any of their representatives had done for the North. So all I can say to the North is that if the Board of Directors of New Zealand First decides that we will stand a candidate in that electorate, and if the Right Honourable Winston Peters is that candidate, the North will finally have a person, have a candidate, have a representative that absolutely would stand for them. And finally they would get some voice in this House. That would be all I would say about Mr. Smith's inability to actually understand the Electoral Commission and the rules around MMP. Not that they like MMP, so therefore. Mr. Speaker, can we just take a moment and actually, can I just acknowledge that this is Safer Internet Day and acknowledge the work of NetSafe. The Right Honourable Amy Adams there, she's also tweeted out about Safer Internet Day. It is an issue, a growing issue with regard to our young people or just our communities in general. The Prime Minister made a small statement, a small acknowledgement of legislation around cyber safety and cyber bullying that will be coming back into this House. Could I say to the Minister that if she would like to take a moment, have a good look at new evidence and new information that has come to light since that bill left the Select Committee, that she might like to consider taking a wise move such as Nikki Kay did around the food bill and send it back to the Select Committee. There is some very, very interesting international information that has come to light since that bill has left Select Committee, and it really should be sent back there for some more comment. But I'll leave that with the Minister. I know she's been spoken to about it by other parties. But let's take another single sentence that the Prime Minister made in his speech. He said, good progress is being made on better public service results. Really? Now, do we think that the reason why the Prime Minister made a single cursory mention at all inside that statement about violence against women is because this government actually doesn't have a single target to address what is one of the most major issues affecting 52% of the voting public of New Zealand. 52% of our population is female, and this is a major issue, violence against women, which then leads on to all sorts of consequences for children, was not even mentioned, or had a cursory mention, 2 words, I think. Now, I want to acknowledge that the Minister, Amy Adams, actually stood up and was very passionate about things that she was doing inside her ministerial role. But they are all things that are going to be done after a woman has been beaten, after a woman has been attacked, after a woman has been raped, after an incident has happened. Where, oh where, is the plan from this government to actually move this along, change the social circumstances. And I say, this is, we had a minister sent by this government in 2012, the Minister for Women, the previous minister, not Louise Upston, went to the United Nations and referred in a speech there when she was reporting back on CEDAW, the elimination of discrimination against women. When she was reporting back on CEDAW, she made a statement that the national government was working on a successor to the 2004 to 2009 Action Plan on Gender Equality. So I wanted to know, how was this going? What was in that action plan, Minister, that you told the United Nations, stood up at the United Nations and said that your government was addressing this issue for women? So I wrote a question for written answer. And I asked the current minister, Louise Upston, what is the successor to the 2004 to 2009 action plan that she said to the United Nations that this government was working on? And the answer is the Better Public Service targets. And specifically the following: reduce the number of people at working age who are on a benefit, increase participation in early childhood education, increase infant immunisation, reduce assaults on children, increase the proportion of 18-year-olds with NCA level 2, and increase 25 to 35-year-olds with advanced training qualifications. That's the plan. That's the plan to address violence against women inside this nation. One that the government fully admits is an issue. One that Amy Adams just positively, passionately spoke about. And that's the plan. Immunise more 2-year-olds. That is unforgivable. What it says is, you don't have a plan. And the Prime Minister slides over the top of it when he makes that statement. Because not a single thing there is going to help those women that are out there being paid less than their male colleagues doing the same job. Now, I don't know if this minister was being deliberately obtuse or whether this is actually the policy of this government. But perhaps some of the other speakers might like to take it up. The other thing too we saw, and what we've seen is, we've seen domestic violence has risen as an overall share of violent offending over the last few years while this government, because the Prime Minister stood up and suggested that everything is good and well and lovely and we're on the right track. I have to say, Mr. Speaker, there are parts of the speeches that have followed and also the Prime Minister's that reminded me of speeches back in the 1990s. And Mr. Smith just mentioned a minute ago about growing pains. And that, of course, we're going to have growing pains. What it reminded me was when the New Zealand public were told, no pain, no gain. Hold on, New Zealand. Keep letting us do this to you. Keep letting us cut your services. Keep letting us drive you down. Keep letting us sell your assets and make you dependent upon charity, because at the end of the day it'll be good for you. That's what we continue to hear. And while we're talking about relying on charity, let's not fool ourselves. This government is going to sell the housing stock of New Zealand because they belong to us, New Zealanders. They're going to sell them, they say, so that they can provide more flexibility and so on and so forth inside the housing market. Let's get real about this. Right now, those are assets on the government's books. They have to maintain those assets. They have to make sure that they monitor them and look after them. The moment they sell them, all we get is a budgetary item that says we will pay somebody else for the ability to actually rent that house. Now, what will they do next? They will cap that amount of money. They will cap that amount of money when the Salvation Army or whoever else has now actually got that asset and needs to maintain it. And then they're going to say, well, the maintenance is your problem. That's your problem. We don't own it. It's your asset now, and we're capping this amount of money. And the Salvation Army will go out of their way to continue to try and provide that housing for those people, because that's what the Salvation Army does and that's what those other NGOs do. And that's what this government works on, emotional blackmail. It's making more and more people look after their fellow New Zealanders from a charitable basis because they refuse to pay for it, at the same time as they open profit-making schools and hand over hundreds of thousands of New Zealand dollars to people making a profit out of children who have to go to school. That is the true state of this nation. That is what should have been in the Prime Minister's original speech. New Zealand First will take this fight at any place in New Zealand that it is required to take it. But we will fight for it. We will continue to stand up for New Zealanders, and we will continue to stand against the policies of this government. Kia ora.
The Honourable Tim Grosser.